Please remove your caps and stand if you are able, as the Fenimore Golden Eagle Mean Machine play your national anthem.
Vertical Raise is the premier online donation platform, utilizing email, text messaging, and social media campaigns to exponentially increase the reach of your fundraiser. With detailed tracking and the complete personalization of every page, Vertical Raise provides an easy system that works. Our experienced representatives have made us the most effective fundraising platform available. We look forward to the opportunity in helping elevate your program to the next level and reaching your goals. Visit online or call today.
This is a QueenB Radio High School Sports Presentation.
Hello and welcome to the high school football section of the QueenB YouTube High School Sports Roundup show. This week, I'm joined by Tom Nisus, Scott Tolsman, and Steve Prestegard. We'll be recapping Week 5, previewing Week 6, and going over the much-anticipated Steve's High Five. So we'll get right to it. We'll start with a very important High Five game that was covered by Steve and Tom. Platteville scores 21 and shuts out Prairie du Chien at Prairie du Chien. What was your guys' thoughts in covering that game, Steve and Tom?
Well, Steve, you can go first. That was my first time at seeing Platteville, so you probably have a bigger picture view of them, but I can jump in. I've got some thoughts.
Well, it's Platteville's still only given up 6 points in the conference season, and 6 points in their last 4 football games. Now, if there's a team that's playing better defense right now, I want to see who that team is. Prairie du Chien attempted to use the run game, their I formation team, to slow down the game and to keep the ball away from Platteville's offense. Problem with doing that is you have to score at the end of drives. And you remember the drive that started the game, Prairie du Chien had the ball for almost 7 minutes, but ended up with 0 points. And that was kind of the first tip-off that may not end up working out so well for Prairie du Chien.
Well, I tell you, again, I'm a basketball guy, but I love watching high school football, really football at any level. And what I saw in that game, and it kind of ties into a later game we're going to talk about, I thought the difference was the quarterback play. Platteville quarterback, 16 out of 21, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. Prairie du Chien's 11 out of 21, 65 yards. The rushing was a wash. Platteville rushed for 3 yards a carry on 25 attempts. Prairie du Chien rushed for 2.9 yards per carry on 22 attempts. And I think Steve's right. I think that was the biggest downfall for Prairie du Chien. They could not get their rushing offense going against that Platteville defense. I think Platteville, I was looking through my numbers, they've given up 1 touchdown since that Darlington game. I think that was the Broadhead Judah. And, You know, offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. That's what everybody always says. And I don't know, Platteville turned me into a Platteville truther last Friday, you know, and I thought they looked good. I'm still struggling what I think about the Platteville-Lancaster game, but in many ways, Platteville's the best high school football team I've seen in the area this year.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Steve and I have covered a couple of their games too. It's in the Broadhead Judah game, and yeah, they're firing on all cylinders at the right time. Kind of speaking of which, the Swall gets into their regular season, I guess you'd call it. They're finally playing their conference opponents. Cuba City beat Belleville at Cuba City. We had Rob and Wally covering that game. Cuba City kind of did what they expected. Quarterback Tyson Richard, 14 of 18, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. 11 attempts on the ground, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Gavin Vossen had a really good, solid game at wide receiver, 7 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. What do we think of Cuba City going forward?
I think the interesting question is going to be, we've been always talking about, well, who's the second best team in the Swall? Of course, they have an opportunity because they have Darlington coming up on their schedule. That is clearly not going to be an easy game. Certainly, that's next week, and we will have that on Super Hits 106. But I thought it was impressive how Cuba City came back from how badly they got beat by Potosi Cassville the week earlier, I believe that was. You always kind of wonder about that. You wonder about the bounce back from big wins and also from big losses. And to the credit of the Cuba City coaches, they got things going in the right direction after a loss where they couldn't have been very happy with anything really in the game they played previously.
Definitely. And kind of going with the theme of in the conference or in the games we covered, and kind of in every conference in general, teams kind of separating themselves, but in the way we expected. We had Lancaster beating Richland Center 43-10 at Richland Center. And Scott, you were able to cover that game. What are your thoughts on the Flying Arrows?
You know, I like their offense when it's clicking, the option, the quarterback, Wolf and Alvarado, the running back. They really do a kind of mesh together. The passing game could be a little bit stronger. And when I looked at that game, Richland Center is young. I mean, they haven't won a game yet this year. They're I think if I remember right, I counted like 5 starters that are seniors on offense and 2 starters on defense that are seniors. So you can see the youth, but they never quit. But Lancaster just, they kind of took it nonchalantly down the field and scored when they needed to. And they kept Richland Center pretty much at bay all night.
Yep.
So I look at Lancaster, and you're looking at Platteville and Lancaster, big game this week. Platteville's got to shut down the running game, and Lancaster's got to shut down the passing game. It'll be interesting to see who can do what.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to talking about Richland Center. That's rough having a fairly young team playing in the SWC conference is just looking phenomenal this year. And not that they haven't in years past, but man, a couple really, really good teams that should be looking to make deep playoff runs.
Well, when you get your schedule, I would think, Josh, you look at that conference, okay, if you're Richland Center, well, we know Broadhead Judah is going to be tough.
Yep.
Well, we know Lancaster is going to be tough. Well, we know Prairie du Chien is going to be tough. And all of a sudden, here comes Platteville. I mean, holy cow. I mean, you got a gauntlet of really good, powerful football teams. And I got to think, once you've been through that gauntlet, man, that's got to be pretty tough physically if you're young and if you don't have the numbers that you need to try to keep people fresh.
Yep, definitely. And especially seeing some of, I wouldn't say maybe a majority of these teams in the SWC that are rotating guys in and out too, and able to not quite platoon, but have a healthy rotation of fresh players. On the Saturday game, Steve and I had the pleasure of going to Blanchardville for homecoming. I happened to get stuck behind the parade, so I ended up walking about a mile over to McKellar Park, but we made it in time. River Ridge kind of dominated pretty much most of the game. Quarterback Brandon Davis, a sophomore, threw for a touchdown, rushed for a touchdown, and caught a touchdown pass in the win. River Ridge on the game, 38 rushing attempts, 269 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Bright spot for Peck Argyle, Tyler McCown, 5 catches, 141 yards, and 2 long touchdowns. Steve, any other takeaways from that game?
It was not a surprise. Certainly River Ridge is certainly one of the top teams this year in the Six Rivers, and there's been a lot of changes going on at Peck Argyle, including, interestingly, the roster at the start of the year is not the roster as of now. A lot of people have joined, which is a good sign for Peck Argyle, but that's a difficult situation to have new people suddenly playing, and it's homecoming, and you got a very good program, and playing an offense that's difficult to play against. As you know, as teams that have played Lancaster and teams that have played Darlington have found out, the flex bone, as those teams played, that's a difficult team, difficult kind of offense to play against. So it hardly, nothing anybody would be particularly surprised at out of that game. I'm just glad I got to the where I needed to go before the parade came out. I think even just seconds before the parade started.
I'm kind of surprised they didn't have a parade the second we left town.
Yeah,
these guys are finally gone. Time for another parade. Don't come back. No.
Hey, homecoming only happens. Well, wait a minute. Homecoming happens twice a year with Peck Argyle, so
yeah.
We still have their Argyle homecoming coming up.
So we'll move on to the SWC scores and games that we didn't have on the QueenB Radio Network. Kind of what we expected, I think, but I'll leave it to Tom and Scott. Broadhead Judah over River Valley at Broadhead, 54-19 in a game between the two teams with 10 passing attempts.
Well, River Valley, I think it's happened to other teams this year. They were the unfortunate victim the week after Broadhead Judah was beaten by Platteville. I would suspect there was a little bit of frustration being taken out on the Blackhawks on that night. I think I get a chance with Tyler to see River Valley at Lancaster a week from Friday, so I've not really seen them yet. I found some film on them, but I haven't watched it yet. But you never like to play a good team the week after they get upset, because they usually are really gunning for bear.
Yep. And we've seen that a couple times this year. Absolutely.
And it's another example of like Lancaster Richland Center. You have an older team versus a younger team, and Valley graduated some good players last year, and they're a little bit young and building, and Broadhead Judah is a much older team with more success.
Yep. They had 48 rushing attempts, 397 yards, and 6 touchdowns in that game for Broadhead Judah. You win some football games that way. And then in the final SWC score, we had Westfield over Dodgeville, 20-8 at Dodgeville. Couldn't find any stats or much about that game. Don't know a whole lot about the Westfield program, but Scott, your thoughts on that?
I haven't seen Westfield play this year and don't know much about them, but the same thing happened last year. If Dodgeville would have beat Westfield last year, they would have made the playoffs. This year, it may come back to bite them again, because I think Dodgeville can compete with Richland Center and Valley and have a chance to maybe sneak out a win, but losing to Westfield will hurt. But again, Dodgeville's building. They're young and not a lot of experience on varsity level.
Definitely. As I mentioned before, Swall is kind of back into their quote-unquote regular season games, playing each other. And Steve and I think everyone said we're kind of getting a better picture of who those other teams than Darlington might be that are making the playoffs this year. Mineral Point came out on top against Fenimore 35-6 at the Rock. Gibson Spurley, solid game. And I watched some of the film of that game, and kind of all Fenimore could really get going was quarterback Ethan Scheckler scrambling. And what do we think of Mineral Point going forward?
Well, I think there's probably two.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, I think there's probably two teams that have improved the most from the start of the season. Platteville is one because, they gave up 34 to Darlington. They've given up 6 points in 4 games. But the other team, I think, is Mineral Point, because they lost to Lancaster to start the season. They got shut out by Platteville. But ever since then, after that loss to Platteville, they've seemed to have gotten everything going. And here they are tied for first in the Swall. So Mineral Point has been a rapidly improving team since the conference season got going. So that's going to make their game this week rather interesting, possibly.
You look at Mineral Point and say, okay, they lost to Lancaster, but it was a 1-score game, and actually Point had the chance to win that game a couple times and never finished. Now you look at the game between Platteville and Mineral Point. Look at what Platteville's doing right now, and Platteville flexed his muscles against Point. Some of it's probably due to numbers and platooning a little bit, wore Mineral Point down. But you're right, Mineral Point's improved a lot, and I think they're probably the second best team now, I feel, in the SWAL.
But Mineral Point, Cuba City, last game of the season matchup is looking tasty.
Yeah, that could be a high-scoring game, I think. Good quarterbacks on both sides and good skill people on both sides. The defensive coordinator is going to earn their money that night, I'm thinking.
And the final result in the Swall, Parkview Albany ends up forfeiting against Darlington. They had some injuries and some illnesses, I believe. And also, in the back of your minds, it's almost kind of a player safety issue.
Yeah, it seemed obvious what the result of the game was going to be. So it's kind of, I'm sure Darlington wasn't too happy, because you don't want to take a week off in the middle of the season. Apparently there had been some talk about maybe a replacement game, but that didn't end up happening. So on the one hand, Darlington has a couple injuries, I believe, so maybe taking the week off will help them going forward.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to the Six Rivers, kind of another interesting conference. Wondering how many teams, it's a loaded conference, and how many teams are going to make the playoffs. Can we see Blackhawk, Potosi Castle, and River Ridge, all three of them make it? And that's kind of assuming Southwestern East Dubuque doesn't take a game off of one of those teams. In our first result, we had Potosi Castle beating Benton Scalesbound Shullsburg 52-6 in Potosi. They're coming off an injury to Roman Frederick on the ground, but ended up still going 29 attempts for 357 yards and 7 touchdowns. What are our thoughts, Tom, on Potosi Castle going forward?
Well, I haven't seen them this year, but I do know they're extremely well coached. Plenty of size. They have tradition. They are all football coaches. Football coaches are maybe Scott can weigh in on this. Football coaches are notorious and great about talking about adversity, facing adversity, overcoming adversity. Our backs are against the wall. We've got to overcome this. And they certainly faced some adversity against Darlington. And they've been very, very good since then. I think it's a given they'll be in the playoffs. The question will be, what's their record going to be? Who are they going to play at home? I mean, that's why I think the Blackhawk River Ridge game is important. They've matched up in the playoffs before. Winners certainly would have the edge on home field advantage. And I tell you what, if I'm River Ridge, I'd rather play up in Patch Grove than I would in South Wayne. That's a very tough place to play football. It's a tough place to call a game, especially when the wind is blowing through the open windows there. It's just a tough place. And, but I think Potosi-Cassville, I didn't know anything about the injury. Roman Frederick is a pretty important piece to their puzzle, but they seem to have enough depth that they can withstand a few injuries. I mean, every team has people out, and some teams, it just kills them. Other teams, they have enough coming, behind them that they're okay.
Adversity is a good term, and when you have injuries, you really got to rely on the next guy up. And I remember one year where two of my running backs were out for a game. I brought in my tight end, who was about 6'3", and he'd get to the line of scrimmage, and by the time he gets tackled and falls down, he gained 3 yards. So, but we relied on him, and he got the job done. So,
excellent segue into the Blackhawk Warren Southwestern East Dubuque game. So, the farm director for WGLR, Bob Middendorf, doubles as the PA announcer at Hazel Green, and he kind of filled me in on a wild game for homecoming at Southwestern. Southwestern East Dubuque was without Brady Hughesman, their leading rusher. He's out with an injury. He still played, but he couldn't really play much offense with a hand injury, so they moved their tight end to running back. Blackhawk Warren led 14-0. Southwestern East Dubuque took back the lead through the passing game to 2014 at the half. And Southwestern was coming back at the end, and Blackhawk Warren got a pick six with 39 seconds left to close out the game. Just kind of a wild and unexpected game. I mean, I've been saying it kind of all season that Southwestern East Dubuque is not a team to, if you take a game off, they'll come out and beat you. Moving on to Ridge and Valley. Again, kind of a top-heavy conference. So we got Hillsborough and Highland looking very good. Iowa Grant, pretty solid. They edged Riverdale 38-36 at Iowa Grant. Iowa Grant led 24-8 at 24-8 at the half, and were able to hold off a Riverdale comeback. Riverdale took to the air. Wide receiver Andre Tainter had 5 catches for 173 yards and 3 touchdowns. What are we think Iowa Grant is going to make the playoffs this year?
Well, they certainly have a quarterback that's good enough to lead them to the playoffs. He's very skilled. They got guys around him. Tyler and I had them against Boscobel, and they also had a big lead in that game. I just question the amount of depth that they have. I mean, that's 2 out of the last 3 games where they have nearly given up big leads in the second half. But in terms of offensive talent, I think they have the offensive talent to be playoff contenders. Defensively, they gave up a lot of points last week. They gave up a lot of points against Boscobel, kind of the antithesis of Platteville, who gives up no points. And I think it's all you're treading on thin ice if you can't stop the other team, because they'll just dictate things to you.
Definitely.
I think we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks whether or not Iowa Grant's going to make the playoffs. They have their homecoming game on Friday, and it's against Wazeeka Steuben Seneca, which has been a disappointment this year to this point. And then the next week they take on Highland, and of course Highland's tied for first with Hillsborough. So if Iowa Grant can win on Friday, that gets them their third conference win, and that puts them on the playoff bubble. So at that point, it depends on, what other teams do across the state and all that. And if they can come up with if they can win Friday and come up with one more win in their last 3 weeks, that puts them in the playoffs. And they were a surprise in the playoffs last year. And, maybe they can take the momentum from that. But this game Friday that they have is pretty close, very close to a must win for Iowa Grant.
I think they can make it. You look at it, they beat basketball, and they won last week against Riverdale. They got Wazeeka, who hasn't been playing very good. And then obviously they have Hillsborough and Highland yet, but they got Ithaca, who has been up and down too. So, I really think overall wise, IG can make it.
Yep. Personally, for me in that conference, Ithaca has been the most disappointing team. I saw them scrimmage in Lancaster. I thought they looked really good, but for whatever reason, and I don't know the story behind it, they had a coaching change mid-season. And I think that happened to Mineral Point a couple of years ago. And I can't think of anything that could possibly be more disruptive than that, a coaching change in the middle of the year. So I don't know, Ithaca may continue to be a disappointment, or maybe they'll get their act together and be a low seed and a very dangerous foe when the playoffs come out. We'll just have to wait and see. But I'm really disappointed. They were my pick to win that conference.
And it doesn't help when the scheduling gods for Ithaca have you facing D7 number 1 Cashton, D7 number 2 Bangor, D7 number 10 Potosi Cassville, and then this last Friday playing against Highland at Highland, where they lost 29-0. That's tough going.
Yeah.
And another game that kind of closer than expected, Hillsborough 28 over Boscobel 7, and a game where Hillsborough was up 14-7 at the half. Is Boscobel starting to turn it around?
I tell you what, again, that's another, as I said, Tyler and I did the Boscobel Iowa Grant game. I have a lot of respect for those Boscobel kids. They're pretty young. Their quarterback also is a very fine athlete, and they play hard. I mean, it would have been very easy when they got down to Iowa Grant to cash it in, but they came back and they must have played a heck of a first half. And again, depth is an issue with Boscobel. They just have no depth. They're building there. But I tell you what, I was really impressed by how hard those kids competed. And they may not win a lot of football games this year, but I think they'll go on to do a lot of good things in life. So you just got to keep plugging away.
Well, the schedule works out, I think, actually well for them the next couple of weeks, because in the next 2 weeks, they've got Ithaca at home Friday night, and then next week they go to Riverdale. And I think Riverdale is a little, people thought that Riverdale was going to be better than they've been so far, just because of how many people they had back. But, and of course, that's the arch rival on the other end of 133. So, but basketball, I think, has a pretty good chance, given what Ithaca's season has turned out to be. And with Riverdale, they have a chance to win, actually, each of their next 2 games at least.
Definitely. And then rounding out the Ridge and Valley schedule, Luther 34 over Wazeeka Steuben Seneca 0 at Seneca. And an 8-player, we had another Belmont win, 26-0 over Kickapoo Lafarge at Belmont. And we'll have Coach Brandon Weiss on for our one-on-one with a great one this week. So I'm sure he'll recap a bit of that game as well. So that concludes our recap. Now for the part that Steve's really been looking forward to, the Steve's High Five.
Hey, how come you didn't give me a high five in the booth the other day?
Because I was trying to. I got distracted. That's
Okay.
that's my excuse. I got distracted.
All right, I accept it.
Not a whole lot of changes.
Cord.
Not a whole lot of changes this week from after week 5. Number 1, Lancaster. 2, Blackhawk Warren. 3, Darlington. 4, Platteville. 5, Potosi Castile. And the only real switch, last week, Platteville was 5. They switched spots with Potosi Castile. And Prairie du Chien was also tied for 5th, and they'll drop out of the rankings. What's the method to the madness this week, Steve?
Well, basically, it was simply that Platteville won a huge game, their second ranked game of the second game against a ranked, second game against a ranked opponent this season. And it's a little more difficult to win those on the road. And it's a little more difficult when you're playing not in a situation you're accustomed to, like a 4:45 start in Prairie du Chien because of the officials. Here's an interesting piece of trivia, by the way. Those officials did not see a single point scored by the home team in either game they did, because Prairie du Chien got shut out, and then they went to Seneca for the Wazeeka-Steuben-Seneca game, and they got shut out. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before, but that's a little trivia, I guess. But, it's not like Potosi Castile played badly or anything like that, but they just didn't play a very good team. And, there's likely to be changes this week also, obviously, depending on what the Lancaster-Platteville game turns out. And then also, based on what Darlington does against Mineral Point.
Definitely. And yeah, just looking at this list, it's awesome to be able to cover teams of this caliber in our area.
So I'm wondering, does the number 1 team in Steve's high five get a trophy with a hand and their name on it or anything? Is there a prize at the end of the season?
We have 3 weeks to decide that, and then
right.
Somebody else can pay for it.
Okay.
I'll see if it's in the QueenB budget to get the high five trophy.
Find a sponsor for it.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, there we go. If anyone out there is wanting to sponsor.
Grow your business by enhancing your digital marketing efforts with QueenB Radio and Phase 3 Digital. We provide customized solutions based on your business's unique needs, including targeted advertising, website development, and search engine optimization. Contact us at 608-349-2000 or visit p3da.com/Platteville to learn more.
Let's check in on the Shoebox Scoreboard presented by the Shoebox in Black Earth, the largest independent shoe store in the Midwest. After Tuesday's volleyball matches, Dodgeville now stands alone in first place in the SWC after defeating River Valley 3-1 on Tuesday night and remain undefeated in conference play. Highland remains at first place in the Six Rivers West with the perfect 6-0 record, and both Mineral Point and Cuba City still have yet to lose a match against Swell opponents. In the matches over the last week, Dodgeville knocked off both Platteville and River Valley to keep their perfect conference record intact. Mineral Point defeated both Fenimore and Boscobel in straight sets to push their record to 6-0, while Cuba City won their only Swell matchup in straight sets against Iowa Grant. Highland won their only Six Rivers West matchup 3-1 over Cassville on Tuesday night. In this week's schedule, Cuba City has conference matches against Fenimore and Darlington, while Mineral Point takes on Southwestern and Iowa Grant. In the SWC, Dodgeville will try to stay in first place with matches against Lancaster and Richland Center. Next week's Tuesday night volleyball match on 97.7 Country WGLR will feature Platteville at Lancaster. And in the Six Rivers West, first place Highland has only one conference matchup when they host Potosi on Thursday night. In cross country, a number of local teams competed in the Greg Bell Memorial Night Meet in Boscobel on September 14th. In the boys' race, Dodge Point held off Fenimore by 2 points to come away with the team victory. Lane Arrett won the race individually with a time of 16:01, while Fenimore's Isaac Hinkle broke the school record with a time of 16:12. Iowa Grant's Brett Connolly and Dodge Point's Cody Yoder also finished in the top 5. In the girls' race, Dodge Point also had the top team score with 44 points, as the Robinson girls, Ellie and Annie, were the top two individual finishers in the race. Ellie Robinson finished first with a time of 18:25, and Annie was just 3 seconds behind her with a time of 18:28. Darlington's Adelie Burgett, Southwestern Co-op's Anna Martinson, and Boscobel's Aaliyah Kleesner rounded out the top 5. At the Westby Invitational on Tuesday night, Boscobel finished in first place in the boys' race with a team score of 67 points. The Bulldogs' Gabe Davis finished in second place individually with a time of 17:53. River Ridge's Luke Patterson finished in third with a time of 18:31. In the girls' race, Boscobel also took first place with 69 team points. Boscobel's Nora Gilson and Leah Kleesner finished first and second, respectively, with times of 19:54 and 20:13. River Ridge's Leah Patterson finished fifth with a time of 21:32. In girls golf, Lancaster hosted a quad match at the Lancaster Country Club on September 14. The Flying Arrows were once again victorious, defeating the second-place Southwestern Co-op by 20 strokes. Lancaster's Brianna Kirsch and Evie Dianchan finished in the top 2 spots, while Southwestern's Brooklyn Bussin finished third. At the SWC Conference Meet at Darlington Country Club on Tuesday, Lancaster soundly won the conference title by 44 strokes with a team score of 356. Lancaster's Brianna Kirsch shot a 71, finishing 16 strokes ahead of Wisconsin Dells' Madchen Ewing. Brianna Kirsch had the top individual score in each conference golf meet in 2023. In boys soccer, the Platteville Lancaster Co-op defeated Dodge Point on Tuesday night 3-1. Those are the scores on the Shoebox Scoreboard presented by the Shoebox in Black Earth, the largest independent shoe store in the Midwest. This one-on-one with the Great One interview is presented by People's State Bank.
Looking for a checking account with no monthly requirements or service charge? People's State Bank's People's Checking Account is just what you're looking for. This account includes free debit card, online and mobile banking, bill pay, and much more at no cost to you. You heard that right. No cost to you. We're your local community bank ready to serve you. People's State Bank. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to the QueenB Radio High School Sports Roundup. It's now time for us to go one-on-one with a Great One presented by People's State Bank. And our guest this week guided his Belmont 8-player football team to the state championship game last season. He's now in his 8th season as the head coach of the Belmont football program and was recently promoted into the activities director role at Belmont High School. Brandon Wiese is our guest this week. Brandon, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on, Tyler.
Yep, absolutely. Our pleasure. And we'll get into your coaching journey in a little bit, but as we said, you've been promoted into the activities director position. I believe this last July is when you took on the position. Talk about how these first few months have been getting adjusted to the new role, and what are some of the challenges that you've had taking on this new position?
Yeah, I'm sure you can imagine the first few months are certainly busy and that, but it's been exciting. I've been obviously at Belmont for a while now and had a chance to see some of these athletes and coaches and that blossom in their program. So it's just fun to be in a different light with all of them now as the activities director.
Awesome. And last year was quite the year for Belmont athletics, obviously in football, the state championship appearance, girls basketball reaching the sectional final, same for softball, and then wrestling as a team getting to sectionals for the first time in their program's history. Sure seemed like a fun year to be a Belmont Brave. Talk about how meaningful those experiences were for your student athletes and for the Belmont community.
Yeah, I'm obviously a little biased, but I feel like we have a lot of good things going here at Belmont, and as you mentioned, it's not just in one area, and our student athletes and our coaches are really doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and so it's been fun to see that their work that they put in kind of show, not just in Southwest Wisconsin but throughout the state.
Yeah, now let's talk about your coaching experience and the journey that led you to where you are at Belmont. Where did your interest in football and maybe sports in general begin, and how did you get into the coaching field?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I felt like I had really good coaching role models when I grew up at Fenimore, and we were part of several runs in football and some other sports there that a long ways in the postseason. And after high school, I had a chance to coach here actually at Belmont as an assistant while I was going to school, and did that for a while. And right after I completed school, I was fortunate that I got a chance to coach with Mark Siegert at Potosi there and learn a little bit from his program and that. And when I had a chance to come back to Belmont, certainly all of those experiences, I feel like have had a chance to mimic some of those things, and have had some fortunate role models here at Belmont too that I've been able to build off of and bring into my program and now into the activities here at Belmont.
Yeah, we had Mark Siegert as our one-on-one with the Great One guest a couple weeks ago, and he's obviously a well-respected head coach, athletic director in this area. Since you had an opportunity to coach with him, what are maybe some of the tips and pointers and some of the advice that you got from him that's helped you in your current position?
Yeah, I think, obviously Mark does an excellent job, and a lot of his things are simplistic. However, he's consistent in his approach. He's organized, and, it's always about the kids first. And, that's definitely a big piece that we bring to our table here too, is, we want our kids to have great experiences. We want them to work hard, in those experiences, but, we want them to get great experiences out of what they do here too.
Yep, and we've talked about this quite a few times on our panels during the high school sports roundup, these first few episodes. But, 8-player football is a fun type of football to watch, especially if you like scoring and, fast moving plays. I kind of compare it to arena football in a lot of ways. But a lot of the same principles, from 11-player football do translate over to 8-player. But I'm curious, from a coaching perspective, what are some of the things that you have to do differently between 8-player football and 11-player football that maybe some people aren't necessarily aware of?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a lot of consistency. And, I think one thing that we adjusted is, our players have to be a little bit more versatile, especially in the box. Our offense and defensive linemen, we've adjusted some of our strength conditioning on, some of that where, we need them to be a little bit more mobile than maybe they might be in 11-player. Otherwise, a lot of our stuff is basically we take what the other team's given us and we adapt to it. So there might be times where different guys might be throwing the ball or running the ball that may not have in 11-player and so forth. But yeah, as you mentioned, we have a lot of fun with it too, and I think our kids do as well.
Yeah, but talk about that transition from 11-player to 8-player. We're starting to see 8-player become more of a common brand of football across Wisconsin, just because enrollment numbers tend to be down in a lot of these smaller school districts. But you've had a lot of success with it. DeSoto is another one that's had some success. Talk about that transition. What are some of the things that you guys have had to manage going from 11-player to 8-player?
I think our biggest thing, especially at the beginning, was not to do too much at once. We really took our schemes that we used in 11-player and just said, okay, how do we adapt it, here or there. But we really did a lot of the same approaches with our schemes, and same thing. We tried to create consistency, in our preparation and those things, and would just kind of go to clinics here or there, talk to coaches there. So that piece of always learning is a part of our program and what our staff does.
Yeah, but you've had quite a tenure at Belmont already, a lot of accomplishments, in addition to the state championship game last year. Your team was undefeated in 2020, and I think those two are probably the most obvious accomplishments that that you'd be proud of. But are there other accomplishments and other memories and stuff like that that kind of stick with you during your time as the head coach at Belmont?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every year is special, and there's, I kind of said this to our team the other day. I said, what makes it fun about coaching is every year the team has a new identity, and what you do with that identity as you go throughout the course of the season. So, I can remember back to my first win as a head coach. That was exciting to, some of the, our first top 10 win, that we had, and as a program, and obviously there are a lot of moments, that you had mentioned, and that we've had. We've had a lot of them in recent years, and so it's been a fun journey, and we're certainly excited about where we're going, and also appreciate what we've done, as a staff and as a school and all of those things.
Yep, and this year's team is off to a nice start, a 3-1 record heading into Saturday's game against Wiese Center. Scott Tulsman and I will have the call of that one on 97.7 Country WGLR on Saturday. How would you assess your team's play so far this season, and what are some of the expectations that you have for your team the rest of the way?
I mean, our expectations really have stayed the same as they have, in recent years. We want to be at the top of the conference. We want to be at the top of the state. We feel like, our team and year in and year out can, be in that spot from, our development that we've had with our youth program to our high school program. At the same time, going back to our week 1 game, you never know what it's going to look like, right after you graduate a class, and we know we have talent on this group. The biggest thing is sometimes some of that, early on season stuff, shows you, where you're at, and also what you need to, correct. And our staff and our kids have done a nice job of taking that message and running with it this early in the season here.
All right, awesome. Well, we're looking forward to covering the game on Saturday, and we're looking forward to see what the Braves do the rest of the season. Thanks a lot for joining us, Coach. We appreciate it. We'll catch up on Saturday, and good luck to your team the rest of the way.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, and we appreciate the coverage. Take care.
Yep, absolutely. That was Brandon Wiese, the head coach of the Belmont football team. We'll have more on the High School Sports Roundup after this on YouTube and SoundCloud.
Check out Supps.com. Supps is Southwest Wisconsin's go-to supplement store. Find all your favorite supplement brands at the best prices from local people. Fuel your fitness journey. Supps.com, your go-to supplement store with locations in Fenimore and Dubuque.
This week's highlight reel is presented by Supps.com.
In the Bitech green zone, just barely. 4 receivers set. Richard to pass. Has a lot of time now. Winds up, throws up the middle. Has a man. It's Brandt. Touchdown. He walks right in, and that's a 20-yard touchdown strike to Caden Brandt. 7-0 Cuba City. Time running thin on the first half for Belleville. They're at the 25, 3rd and 15. Rolling right is Keys. He's being pressured by Pickle. He gets him from behind the sack. Brendan Pickle tracks down the quarterback, and he loses another 5 yards or so. All right, shotgun formation, back to pass. Keys winds up, throws deep into the end zone. It's intercepted, picked off by number 20. That would be Gavin Fawcett in the end zone, and it's a touchback as he lands in the end zone after getting the interception, and Cuba City will take over at their own 20-yard line with 24 seconds left.
3rd and 3, a quick pass to the middle. It is caught and into the end zone are the Mineral Point Pointers, number 7, Tremaine Kinnicker on the touchdown reception, a Northland Buildings touchdown, and the Pointers extend their lead 20-0 with 9:43 to go in the second out of the timeout. Minute 34 to go. Mineral Point 21, Fenimore 0, 2nd and 10. Scheckler drops back to pass for Fenimore, looking far side, one-on-one coverage, and it's intercepted by Mineral Point, and they're going to run it back the other way. Across the 30, to the 40, to the 50. Trying to shake off a couple defenders before being tackled inside the 40-yard line to about the 35. Looks like it was number 0, Grady Finley on the coverage. High pointed the ball, ran it all the way back, and now Mineral Point with golden field position in the final minute 19 to go in the half.
Walks it up, sends it over, line drive, serve, bad bump. Saved from going into the seats and then bumped over. Platteville should be able to set this up now. Here's the set, left side spike, into the back row, and the bad bump goes into the bench of Prairie du Chien, and it's 23-22 Platteville. Elliott sends it over, that's nearly a piece. Platteville now with it. Tipped over at the net, that's dug out. Sent over by Prairie du Chien. Bump at the net, spike from the left side, and down it goes. Avery Richard. 24-22 Platteville. Richard gets the kill from the left side. And this time it'll be Ava Ford to serve to try to force this into extra points. Dug out by Hoosier, diving. Bump set. Left side set over to the opposite corner. Now a set and a send over. Too far, and Platteville wins. Well, that was a white knuckler, but Platteville is able to win set number 1, 25-23 after trailing nearly the whole first set. Set over in the back row. Set over on a bump. Platteville can set this up. Here's Hoosier. Left side spike. Off the back row. And that's it. 25-16 closes out set 3 and closes out the match. Platteville wins in 3. 25-23, 25-8, 25-16.
Grow your business by enhancing your digital marketing efforts with QueenB Radio and Phase 3 Digital. We provide customized solutions based on your business's unique needs, including targeted advertising, website development, and search engine optimization. Contact us at 608-349-2000 or visit p3da.com/Platteville to learn more.
We will get right in to the Week 5 preview. Kind of a smaller slate next weekend, as we'll have the Wisconsin Badgers at Purdue Boilermakers on WGLR for Friday Night Football. Well, I guess afternoon. The WGLR pregame coverage starts at 4 and kickoff is at 6. We'll have Cuba City at Parkview Albany on Super Hits, 6:40 pregame. That'll be covered by Rob Spangler and Mark Evenstad. And that one, that's kind of one where we expect Cuba City to keep rolling, I would think.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how Parkview Albany, having taken a week off of its own because of injuries and so on, how they respond.
Yeah, and I hope, from last I heard, the game will be played. Parkview Albany got a couple players back, so I'm sure that'll make the Cuba City coaching staff happy. On a Saturday game, we have Belmont at Wanawak Center. That will be covered by Tyler Dictanis and Scott Tolsman. Scott, you have a little bit of a preview for that game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. Belmont's on the road. Right now, they're tied for first place in their conference, and Wanawak hasn't won a game in the conference yet. So it'll be interesting to see. I know it's their homecoming, but I do believe Belmont is the stronger team, and I haven't seen much stats out there for Belmont, but I think their quarterback has been throwing the ball well and also running it too. So I'll give the Belmont Braves the thumbs up for that one.
Yep. And that's what it takes in 8-man. You got to have a dual threat quarterback, and they seem to have one. And then finally, Steve Prestegard and myself kind of lucked out being able to call this one. We'll be covering Lancaster at Platteville in the statewide game of the week for pretty much every media outlet. We'll be covering that on Extreme 107 with a 6:40 pregame. Steve, are you already pumped like I am for this one?
Oh yes, I think I started getting pumped as I was driving back from Prairie du Chien on Friday night. There's really enough storylines here to do an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary about this game. You've got it's senior night because the seniors have chosen this game for their senior night, because it's the last game that Platteville will play, or at least is scheduled to play, at Ralph B. Davis Pioneer Stadium. They're moving into their new stadium at the high school for their last game of the regular season against River Valley. And oh, by the way, it's for the conference lead. I think if you had said at the start of the season that Friday night, Lancaster and Platteville are going to be undefeated in the conference and playing for the conference lead, you would have seen some raised eyebrows, because everybody at the start of the season said, well, it's Broadhead, Judah, and Prairie du Chien. And one prognosticator, WisSports.net, actually had Platteville finishing 5th in the conference. I have no idea what they were thinking about that, and they have been proven spectacularly wrong for obvious reasons. But I think, Lancaster and Platteville were kind of seen by people who knew what they were talking about as pretty much dark horses. But it all started when Lancaster knocked off Prairie du Chien, and then Platteville knocked off Broadhead Judah, and all of a sudden the chairs have been rearranged, and sitting up in front now is Lancaster and Platteville.
I looked at some of the numbers of this. I do most of the Lancaster games and saw Platteville for the first time. Both teams play pretty good defense. Lancaster's giving up about 193 total yards per game. Platteville only 170. The last 5 games, Lancaster has won 3 of them. The last 3 games they've won, but the average scores are pretty close. 22, almost 23 points for Lancaster, almost 19 points for Platteville. That's pretty quick. Just to kind of shorten it up, I think this game, and Steve, you can jump in if you want, I think this is a battle between the 2 quarterbacks. Wolf is at 57% completion. Pink is at 67%. Wolf 502 yards, Pink 962. Pink 193 passing yards per game, Wolf 100. Wolf 4 TD passes, 2 interceptions. Pink 11 TD passes, 5 interceptions. They both have weapons around them. If I had to pick, I'm not going to, but I think those numbers kind of tell you the predicament that Lancaster faces. I think Platteville can be really dynamic on offense because their quarterback is dynamic. I think Lancaster can be very dangerous on offense because their quarterback is very dangerous. I think it's going to be a fabulous high school football game. While I'm watching the Badgers, I'm going to find it on YouTube and go back and forth. So I'm looking forward to the call and looking forward to see the game.
Oh, we're looking forward to it, obviously, additionally. So TJ Pink, all those stats you mentioned, he's the #1 quarterback in the SWC in terms of passing and touchdowns and passing yardage. Now, conversely, the #1 running back in the SWC is Peyton Alvarado of Lancaster. And I can see a strategy possibly by Lancaster of try to do what Prairie du Chien did, which is to keep the ball on the ground, come up with long drives, but an important difference would be actually scoring on those drives. I do think Lancaster, it seems pretty obvious, can throw the ball better. And, you could see a situation maybe where Lancaster runs like 7, 8, 9, 10 runs in a row and then throws it into the end zone to kind of surprise Platteville possibly. And I think also that Platteville, conversely, is maybe a little more prepared for this game in one sense because they have already played an option team, and in fact, a team that runs a similar offense in Darlington at the start of the season. Now, that didn't go so well, but I think Darlington, if you look at them, they probably have more weapons maybe than Lancaster does. Although Taylor Williams for Lancaster, I think he's #5 in the conference in receiving, so or somewhere up there anyway in receiving. But it's going to be a fascinating game, and the question becomes: can Platteville's defense, which has, as we've mentioned, given up 6 points in the last 4 games, can they stop a team that has put up 28 points on Prairie du Chien and 43 on Richland Center and 56 on Mawson, I believe, and so on? Maybe the game is really going to be decided when Lancaster has the football one way or another.
I'd ask Scott this question. I mean, Platteville has had to get up to play Broadhead Judah. They had to get up to play Prairie du Chien. Can you get up 3 weeks in a row to play a real good opponent? I mean, is that feasible in high school, or is that something that it's more difficult in college or the pros than in high school?
No, it definitely is difficult. The best thing is that they're playing on their home field, and they're playing good ball, and they beat 2 good teams, so that will keep them up there a little bit. But still, you can't get too overconfident, and sometimes that third game you'll feel like you're overconfident and you'll trip. So, but I think it's going to be a good game.
Okay, I do certainly think that if you have lost 4 games in a row to your arch rival, as Platteville has, I don't think overconfidence is going to be an issue. Maybe they're, are they emotionally a little drained, possibly, from having played these big games like that? Obviously, we'll find out. But they beat Broadhead Judah 2 weeks ago. They had not beaten Broadhead Judah since they were in the conference. They beat Prairie du Chien, and they hadn't beaten them in 7 years. Now the question is, can they beat a team that has really dominated Platteville in about the last 15 years or so, since 1999 when Lancaster started their 3-year run up at state. I counted today, Platteville's only won 6 games against Lancaster during that whole stretch.
And the last win, Steve, was in 2017.
Right. Yeah. And, it's incredibly appropriate that this game is probably for the conference title unless somebody stumbles after this, because they had a 3-year streak, Platteville did, of beating Lancaster, and they needed to win to get in the playoffs in 15 and did. They needed to win to get a share of the title in 16 and 17 and did. So the fact that it's Platteville and Lancaster, you'd kind of like it to be the last game, because you feel like you want to play your arch rival at the very end of the season. But where it is in the schedule, just given how things have turned out, certainly seems as though whoever wins on Friday is going to be in the driver's seat the rest of the season.
Definitely. And going back to being able to get up 3 games in a row, you really noticed when I'm in Platteville, the community has really, really embraced this football team. You see yard signs, just everyone's they're cooking right now. They got something going, so it's awesome to see. And Lancaster obviously always has great support, and they'll travel well, and it'll be an amazing crowd for the game Friday. The other SWC games, we have Richland Center at Watoma, Prairie du Chien at River Valley, and Broadhead Judah at Dodgeville. We kind of thinking those will be kind of chalk games, or what are any upsets in the making?
Well, I have a confident prediction. I have a very confident prediction about the game that Dodgeville will be playing. The game that Richland Center will be playing against Watoma. I will confidently predict for all the world to hear that a team wearing black and orange will win that game. Yes, they are both black and orange.
I know you're confident. You put your glasses on to say that one.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right about that. I will say Richland Center might get their first win, because Watoma is not having a very good year. And, after seeing Richland Center play last week, they never quit against Lancaster. They kind of gave up a couple big plays, but they hung in there and played hard. So I might give it to Richland Center.
We'll see if the Prairie du Chien River Valley game will have more than 10 passing attempts like River Valley had it between both teams last week.
Well, and to make another big prediction, of course, in the Prairie du Chien River Valley game, Blackhawks will win.
And that's why people tune into this show, Steve, is for insights like that.
In the Swall, we'll have Fenimore at Belleville, which should be a pretty interesting game. Belleville has key player back in Tyler Durkee, and that'll be Fenimore's been struggling a little bit, so that'll definitely be an interesting one. And then a really big game. We'll kind of see who Mineral Point is as they host Darlington.
Absolutely. We will see how, and as we mentioned before, I think Mineral Point is one of the couple of teams that has improved the most from the start of the season. But yeah, you're right. We're going to see very much, can Mineral Point's offense move the ball against what I still think is one of the top couple of defenses in all of Southwest Wisconsin. Darlington has an amazing defense. The fact that they lost the game doesn't change that at all. So, the progress that Mineral Point has made on offense is going to be severely tested Friday night.
Definitely. In Six Rivers play, we'll have a really awesome matchup between Blackhawk Warren at River Ridge. And Tom, you have some thoughts about that game.
Yeah, I looked, and last week against Southwestern East Dubuque, Blackhawk Warren threw 7 passes and they ran 51 times. And that's their personality. That's what they do. They average 331 yards per game on the ground, 7.8 yards per carry. And they're run heavy, 213 rushing attempts, only 37 passing attempts. You look at Ridge's heavy run, they have 195 rushing attempts, but they've also thrown it 64 times, almost twice as much as Blackhawk Warren. And looking at the last 4 games, Ridge has won the last 2. The last one was a little bit of an aberration in these 4 games. In the last 4 games, the team with the most rushing yards won, with the exception of River Ridge last year in a very high scoring game. Blackhawk Warren had 327 yards on the ground and lost. They only had 36 yards passing. River Ridge had 255 yards on the ground, which is really good, but they also had 222 yards passing. I'm just an advocate of having some type of a balanced attack because in the victories, River Ridge has been able to shut down Blackhawk Warren's running game. And kind of like what we saw last week, Platteville and Prairie. Platteville shut down Prairie du Chine's running game, and when they tried to pass, it just wasn't there. And I think if River Ridge can outrush and shut down the Blackhawk Warren rushing game, make them have to pass, I'm not sure they can. Maybe they can. I think you have to make them show you that they can. I'm not a defensive coordinator, but and I think River Ridge knows Blackhawk Warren really well, and I think they have a good plan to combat the run. But I think that's what it's going to come down to. You look at Blackhawk Warren's schedule. They beat North Fond du Lac, who hadn't won a game in 3-4 years. They beat Parkview Albany, who, let's be frank, is just not a strong football team this year. Their 30-0 shutout of Fenimore caught my attention. Fenimore is a pretty good team. So it's going to be curious to see how River Ridge attacks Blackhawk Warren, but River Ridge can throw and run. Blackhawk Warren can run. I don't know. Sometimes you just say, you know what? They know we're going to run, and we're going to be good enough that we're going to run anyway. So it's going to be a very curious game.
Definitely. And Steve and I had the pleasure of covering River Ridge against Peck Argyle last week. Peck Argyle will travel to Potosi Cassville this week. What were your thoughts of River Ridge last week, Steve?
Well, I am kind of wondering now, just thinking about this, that I wonder if they were pulling some stuff out of the back of the playbook. Right? Remember the touchdown pass to the quarterback, that maybe they did that so that Blackhawk Warren would have to spend time in practice defending that. That's I hadn't thought about it at the time, but with them playing Blackhawk Warren, some coaches hold the trick plays, so to speak, for the game. Some coaches also bring the trick plays out the week before the big game to make the opponent have to think about them, think about those plays, basically. Blackhawk Warren, in their case, they have 2 huge weeks because they have River Ridge this week, and then they get Potosi Cassville next week for homecoming. What a homecoming opponent. So this is a huge couple of weeks for the Warriors, certainly. And, I guess we'll see about Blackhawk Warren, or we'll see about River Ridge, because it is a Herculean task to stop Blackhawk Warren's running game. It's nothing fancy, but nobody does it else. Nobody else really does it around here. And it's really devastatingly effective, particularly for a school for a program as small as Blackhawk Warren is. They have rather large linemen, and that's one of the reasons that that offense works. So that's going to be very interesting Friday night.
Hey, that trick play point that you made, you really needed to put the glasses on when you made that point, because I was pretty perceptive. Yeah.
And Scott, as a coach, does that just give you one more thing to prepare for? They also, on their extra points, ran the old swinging gate. They ran a couple trick plays. Do you think that's kind of a ploy by the River Ridge team just to give Blackhawk Warren coaching staff one more thing to think about this week?
Oh yeah, it definitely does. You can't ignore it, because if you ignore it, you're going to get beat by it. So it does make you have to practice it, and it does take some time. And if it's the only time you see it, it's still you still have to work at it and get it done. I remember the year when River on Blackhawk went to state, we played them the first game of the year the following year, and I ran 3 trick plays, all the same, and we ended up beating them in overtime. So other teams scouted it out, and it wasn't as successful as it was the first time around.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and they definitely, once it's out there, you got to take time out of practice to prep for it. The final, pretty good, which I think will be a really good matchup in the Six Rivers. It'll be Southwestern East Dubuque at Benton Scales Mound Shullsburg at Benton. And the way Southwestern East Dubuque played against Blackhawk Warren, I think they're pretty hungry for a win in this one.
Oh, definitely. And it's been a tough year for Benton Scales Mound Shullsburg. This is the neighborhood brawl now, and this is the last time that these two teams are going to play, at least in the conference season, because Southwestern East Dubuque will be in the SWAL next year. So it's I do think that, again, similar to the couple of weeks we've had very run-heavy teams, that it's going to be a pretty fast game. Maybe that'll be the first game done once again Friday night. But those neighborhood brawl kinds of games are always a little unpredictable because of the nature of that kind of rivalry.
Definitely. In the Ridge and Valley, this Friday, we will have Ithaca at Boscobel, Wazeeka Steuben Seneca at Iowa Grant, Hillsboro at Riverdale, and Highland at Royal. There's playoff implications, as there is every week, but what are we thinking this the next week will play out in the Ridge and Valley?
I'm not sure you want to try to predict that, because remember how unpredictable the Ridge and Valley's been this season?
Yep.
You could go through that and say, well, Iowa Grant will probably be Wazeeka Steuben Seneca, but Wazeeka Steuben Seneca knocked off Ithaca, and I don't think anybody saw that coming. Yep. So, and the teams that, with one exception, I think, of that being Highland, the teams that were supposed to be on top of the Ridge and Valley at this point are not. And the season's far from over, obviously, but the Ridge and Valley just continues to be a conference that every week something happens. It's like, how'd that happen?
Definitely. Yeah.
It's called parity, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're definitely, to the point in the season where teams are kind of trying to pull away and separate themselves. And to cap it off, notable 8-player games other than the Belmont game that we'll be covering next Saturday: DeSoto at Wisconsin Heights and Kickapoo Lafarge at North Crawford. Again, for any of our viewers that haven't made it out to an 8-man game, the Belmont game will be a really fun game to go to. If you haven't seen it yet, it's really fun to watch. You guys, I assume, have all made it to 8-man games.
Yep. I have not. But it sounds like fun.
It's awesome. Oh, yeah. It's like, Scott, go ahead.
It's a fast game. You got to pay attention because sometimes you have linemen sneaking out there and catching a pass, and you don't think about, hey, wait a minute, that's illegal. Well, in 8-man, it's not. It's an exciting game, and I'm glad the WIA brought it in to keep these small schools have the ability to have their own teams. And you think about it right now, big game for Belmont. DeSoto and North Crawford and Belmont are all tied for first place in the conference, so it's going to all be shaken out here in the next couple of weeks. So, but if you haven't, I would go see it.
Yep, if you can't make it, you can catch Tyler Dictanis and Scott on WGLR. Pregame starts at 12:40 on Saturday. Again, we'll have Badger football on a Friday, which Barry said would never, ever happen. So that'll be very interesting. So that is our high school sports roundup football edition. For Tom Nisus, Scott Tolsman, and Steve Prestigard, I'm Josh Wiederholt. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.